Now, the so-called alt-right or new right, whatever you want to call it, seems to be in some trouble lately. The French party Front National lost pretty dramatically in the presidential elections. And then you have some other right-wing parties in Europe that had some problems lately. And then, of course, you have Donald Trump, the big one, and he's having some issues, and his supporters are getting angry, and he's breaking his campaign promises. So conservatives, and of course I count myself amongst conservatives. Many conservatives right now are pretty confused, and they're looking for answers. Why this train has now slowed down so much, and how do we speed up that train? So, ladies and gentlemen, in politics, just like in business or elsewhere, in politics you have 4 mortal enemies. Number 1, incompetence and stupidity. Number 2, laziness and being passive. Number 3, agents/spies. And number 4, truly evil people like narcissists and psychopaths, antisocials. So, you have a lot of work on your hands to fight these 4 mortal enemies. You have to be really clever to fight those enemies. So, some people say that it will never be successful, you know, if people have suffered some frustrations in politics, if their projects didn't work out or their favorite party didn't take over, people tend to get really depressed and they say it's all futile, you know, we shouldn't be in politics at all. And some people, extreme libertarians, they say we shouldn't be involved in politics because that somehow brings out the devil, per se. But, ladies and gentlemen, politics is not automatically doomed to fail. Politics is not doomed to devolve into evil. That you really need to understand that. Now, the Front National, for example, they lost pretty badly in the presidential elections, and some people are now hopping mad, some right-wingers, and they fantasize about a violent revolution, and others are confused, they don't know what to do. But it's always the same 4 mortal enemies. It's the same 4 mortal enemies. In politics, in the business world, everywhere. So, and how do you fight these? What's the main strategy to fight these 4 mortal enemies? Pick better people. Get people skills. Learn how to choose better people. Now, of course, there's in political parties, there's a lot of members who don't pay their annual fees, who want big change and big, you know, stuff happening, but they can't even, they're not even reliable enough to pay their annual membership fee on time. And then in every party, also in the right-wing, new right, alt-right parties, who should be really motivated to change something, you find a lot of passive members. They just can't get their butt off from their couch in their chair. And of course, some people, they are too busy, you know, they can't really be involved too much in a political party, but a lot of people, they're just lazy. They're just lazy. And in the United States, I mean, how long does it take for people in the US to start new parties who attract a broad audience, you know? How long does it take to establish a new forces, new parties? Some people, they just like to sit around and wait for some savior. Maybe the Russian president will save us. Maybe Donald Trump will save us. Maybe now I can just, you know, make a cross and vote Republican and everything's going to be fine. It's laziness. It's incredible. Incredible laziness. And laziness is your mortal enemy. Then, incompetence and stupidity. It's another mortal enemy. So no matter what right-wing party or new right-wing party or whatever you look at these days, you find quite the amount of incompetence. So the main parties, the big evil parties, the established parties, they use science. They're science freaks. They have so much technology and research into what people are thinking, what people are doing. They can calculate everything, right? And they always have a scientific way of being successful. Now, the new parties, the right-wing parties, or the rebellious, smaller parties, oftentimes they do not use science that much. They use emotions and primitive sentiments, very primitive ideas, or even wrong ideas. For example, a lot of conservatives, or alt-right or new right, believe that Russia is our savior, that Russia is going to help us, that Russia has turned from a communist hellhole into a Christian conservative paradise. Of course, that's all nonsense, but, even big shots in alt-right, new right media and politics think that way. They don't really know anything. They're incompetent and they're stupid oftentimes, unfortunately. And stupidity and incompetence is your mortal enemy. It's your mortal enemy. Now, of course, if somebody like Alex Jones admits on the air that he hasn't read a single book in 5 years, and the 5 years before that he read just a handful of books, that's a red flag. It means incompetence, right? It wasn't pretty hard to analyze Donald Trump from the very start, from the beginning of his campaign, throughout this campaign. It was pretty easy to do a solid job, do a solid analysis of Trump and his entourage and the Trump family and his father and such. It was pretty easy to read all the warning signs and to tell people that this is not going to go well. Not very hard. So, incompetence, stupidity is your mortal enemy in politics. So, then you have... of course, then you have the Front National, the big French party. A lot of people, especially in the West, a lot of non-French people, the conservatives, they tend to advertise for the Front National without really knowing anything about the Front National. So you got some very successful media people in the West who will say, it's great, the Front National is great, and this is totally awesome, but what do these media people know about that French party? Nothing. They maybe know the name of the party leader. They know it's somehow a conservative party. They know it's against, too much migration, and the Front National is kind of aligning itself with the Russians, at least verbally, just like Trump did before flipping. But they don't know anything more than that. They don't get stacks of books, and I've gotten all these books from the 90s, books from the 80s, books from the 2000s and 2010s. I got all these books and I read about that party and I read about the people. But many don't even do that. They don't even know what they're voting for or what they're advertising for. Next mortal enemy in politics, evil people. Really, really, really evil individuals. Usually the most evil people tend to be narcissists and psychopaths. So almost nobody looks at this concrete danger, even though science has made so many breakthrough discoveries about these psychological disorders and the origins in the brain and so forth. And of course, you need to apply that modern knowledge, apply that to politics, because hey, the bad guys, the establishment, they're using modern science about evil for their purposes, for their agenda. They can use that for their ends. So we need to apply that knowledge ourselves. But whether it's the Front National or the Trump fans in the Republican Party, or if it's some other right-wing party, people are not really looking for psychopaths and narcissists. They're not even aware of that general problem, and They don't have any defense against that. They don't recognize someone who is crazy. And of course, we don't have a clinical diagnostic result about Donald Trump, but there's so many red flags, there's so many warning signs. Narcissistic traits, narcissistic behavior, there's enough there in his past, his greediness, his insatiable lust for attention. There's enough to be aware that there's a real problem with this guy. But you have narcissists in conservative media, like Alex Jones, diagnosed narcissist, who just called Trump basically promoted him like he was the political messiah. That was kind of the gist during the campaign. So even I don't have the time to try to psychoanalyze the 100 most important people in the French Front National party, but if I was French, I would take a much closer look, and I'm doing what I can, and I'm aware of these problems, and you just have to look at these people, whether it's Trump or it's these weirdos from the Front National. I mean, that party basically drew that party was filled and still is filled with ultra neo-Nazis, ultra right-wingers, French SS, French original Nazis, veterans of the cruel, insane Algerian war. All of these military officers are, of course, compromised. They can be blackmailed by the government for war crimes and such. Then a lot of people from secret weird military groups like the OAS, made up of veterans of the Algerian war. A lot of these weirdos went into the Front National. So a lot of really cruel people and really deceptive people. And the party's founder, Jean-Marie Le Pen, he reportedly tortured himself and he never apologized for that. So we get a lot of warning signs here. And then, of course, a lot of praise for the fascist Russian regime today. That's a warning sign. A lot of so-called conservatives who are really fascists, even if they don't realize it. A lot of fascists nowadays, they love what Russia is doing today, meaning corporate dictatorship, bunch of oligarchs running it all, racism, government controls religion, government controls everything, nobody's allowed to criticize the government. A lot of so-called conservatives in the West, they really like what the Russians love, what the Russians are doing. And that's a red flag. That's a sign for possible narcissism and psychopathic individuals. And then the fourth mortal enemy in politics, agents and spies, right? So, of course, with Donald Trump, we still have the Russia investigation, the Russiagate thing going on. And I've spoken about this on this channel before. So, yes, there's a lot of very strange, bizarre collusion between Trump and his trusted people and the Russians. But of course, when you talk about important, powerful Russians, there's no clear distinction between mafia, business people, and agents. In Russia, that's all kind of the same thing. But a lot of times with Americans or Westerners in general, powerful Westerners, it's the same kind of situation. It's just some of these people are just a blend of agents and mafia and agents, mafia, and business people. You don't know. You can't really distinguish that. They're all three things. And so, yes, Donald Trump, when he was searching for new money, he made some really significant deals with the Russians, and this needs to be looked at, right? But you also have to consider the possibility that Trump might have been that Trump might have been recruited in the past by the CIA, for example, as an asset, not a career spy, but just an asset, an international businessman who's visiting all these kind of places, shoving money around everywhere in the world. I mean, it just would have just made sense, you know, for the CIA or some other intelligence group to just recruit Trump, right? And we also have one of Trump's former associates, Felix Sater, who's also kind of dealing with the Russians. Felix Sater, reportedly, in the past, Sater collaborated with the CIA to get a more lenient sentence in a court case for shady business dealings. So again, this is how the CIA works. And if the CIA has agents like this, has assets like this, the CIA can build them up and wait till the Russians come, wait till the Russians get interested, right? It's kind of a pull technique, not a push technique in intelligence work, right? It doesn't make much sense for the CIA to just... it doesn't make much sense for the CIA to send classic agents to Russia, you know, Mr. Smith with his sunglasses. He's a businessman and he wants to do business in Russia. I mean, the Russians would see through that in a second. It's more successful if you build up agents here and wait till the Russians are coming. So maybe that's what happened with Trump. And his father Trump's father had some, you know, weird connections to Israel, and that's been known for a long time. And on and on and on. And Trump's former, some of his closest advisors and lawyers have weird connections to Israel, or they were this one guy in the past, I think, was Trump's guide, Donald Trump's guide, his teacher. He was his lawyer, and this person suddenly, as a lawyer, dealt with some high-level espionage cases. You know, he was dealing with Soviet espionage cases. He was a very trusted man, suddenly, in the U.S. government. So this is kind of the stuff you have to investigate. You know, just agents and spies. And as I mentioned, with the Front National, there's a lot of potential for espionage, spies in that party, in the party leadership. So first of all, it would have been easy for the CIA and French intel or Israeli intel to recruit French ultra-right-wingers, you know, French SS neo-Nazis. You know, you can blackmail them for their past deeds or war crimes in World War II or in the Algerian War. You can blackmail them and say, you work for us now, or we're going to ruin your life and put you in prison. Very easy intelligence work there. And the next thing is something that I was made aware of fairly recently. It's about Marion Maréchal Le Pen. So her grandfather is the infamous Jean-Marie Le Pen, the founder of the Front National Party. And her aunt is Marine Le Pen, the current head of the party. And the young Marion Maréchal Le Pen, she's, of course, a superstar as well. She's in the family business and politics. She also won something, and one day she's probably going to run the party. And her biological father, however, is not Samuel Maréchal, but instead her biological father was a Israeli Mossad agent, at the same time CIA agent, and also apparently French agent named Roger Auch. I hope I'm pronouncing this halfway correct. My school French is pretty rusty these days. And this guy, her real father, he had the fake name Pierre Baudry. He did some missions all around the world, contacting people in secret, freeing prisoners, negotiating with certain groups. Some real spy work. And Pierre Baudry at some point, he got arrested by Hezbollah, and then he was freed by the French government. And so one of the former, or one of the closest aides of the former French foreign minister, he was with that plane that freed him, that got him out of the Hezbollah prison. So he was a serious agent. And the French intelligence guys, they tolerated his other work for Israeli Mossad intelligence and also for American intelligence. And his motivation, in his own words, was money. He wanted to make money. And his cover story usually was that of an investigative journalist. He was just, that was his cover identity. And of course, being an international spy, an international man of mystery, that included some sexual adventures, and he fathered 3 children with different women. And he said this was just his private life. This was not part of his intelligence work. But one of his children, but he got one of the women he got pregnant was a woman of the infamous Le Pen family, one of the most important political families in France. So was it just a coincidence that a multiple spy got into bed with a woman from this important political family, Le Pen? Was this just a coincidence? So this was a romance that lasted only a few days. According to him, he was informed about the birth of his child, and that child is Marion Maréchal Le Pen. And 10 years later, he had contact with his child. But he kept working as a spy. He got some new missions brokered by none other than Nicolas Sarkozy, former head of state in France. And he, you know, the usual missions, rescuing prisoners in Somalia, amongst which were 2 Israelis, supposed tourists. Of course, you have to ask yourself, was that just a coincidence? Are there more spies in the Front National Party and the Le Pen family? And right now, the current head of the party, Marine Le Pen, her boyfriend has, I think, Algerian and Jewish roots, and he travels to Israel to make connections. So that guy might be a spy. Of course, you have to look at this. He might not be a spy. And there might be all kinds of different spies. So some people, they always focus and entirely, exclusively focus on Israeli espionage, and they disregard everything else. But of course, you have to look at all these things, these things together. So these are the four mortal enemies that you have to fight in politics. It's stupidity and incompetence, number 1. Then it's being passive and lazy. Then psychopaths, narcissists, and then, of course, spies and agents. And, of course, no matter where you are politically or spiritually, whether you're a Muslim or a libertarian or you see yourself as a centrist or you're a leftist or a right-winger, no matter who you are, where you are politically, you have to fight those same 4 mortal enemies in your group. So we can't be behind these things. We have to think ahead and act accordingly. So all these kinds of political groups, they act like cults. They indoctrinate their members. They tell them everybody who thinks differently is evil, is bad. People shouldn't talk to each other. So that's how society is being divided, and we citizens lose. So the true fight is not really left versus right versus the middle versus libertarians, but the true fight is between competence and incompetence. The true fight is between mentally normal in the normal spectrum and versus truly evil people, narcissists, psychopaths. The true fight is active people versus passive people, and the true fight is between free people versus agents. And of course, the establishment uses a very simple trick. All these political ideologies are exaggerated, right? They make these political ideologies so exaggerated that that you cause this division in society. So instead of reasonable help for those in need, people promote complete utter communism. And instead of reasonable conservative values and ideas, people push ultra right-wing nonsense. And of course, instead of essential libertarian concepts, people push libertarian anarchism. And of course, every extreme group or every group out there, every political group is taught and indoctrinated to hate and punish people who deviate. So if you criticize, so basically, if I criticize, if I attack the four mortal enemies within the conservative sphere, a lot of conservatives will attack me and say, you're not a conservative, you're evil, you're with these others. You must be an SJW, leftist, snowflake, millennial scumbag. No, I'm just fighting the four mortal enemies in the conservative sphere and elsewhere. And so you see certain trends and fads. Like a couple of years ago, libertarianism was a huge trend, and nowadays libertarianism is not so trendy anymore. Rather, it's now the alt-right, the new right, whatever that's really supposed to mean. That's trendy now. And of course, you get a lot of people out there in media and on YouTube and elsewhere, a lot of people who don't really, who are not really knowledgeable, who don't really put in much work in analysis, who are not really that smart. You get a lot of incompetent people who get attention and crave attention and gain an audience with very primitive alt-right, new right slogans, right? Just hate on the leftists, just hate on the SJWs, and hate on all of Islam, and, you know, just rattle off your slogans and always apply a very simple formula to everything. And a lot of very incompetent people and a lot of very greedy and opportunistic people gain a lot of audience with these primitive methods, but that's not a real solution. That's not really good, and that's not really clever. So a lot of people, they've jumped onto this new right, alt-right train. They've jumped on this train. They've jumped on this train, and as solutions, so-called solutions, they promote people like Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin or, you know, Marine Le Pen. Very questionable people and very questionable parties and very questionable movements and some very questionable ideas. So what I'm doing here, I'm thinking ahead, I'm acting accordingly, I'm talking about these four mortal enemies in politics, and that may not mean I'm trendy right now. I may not be totally trendy right now, but I think you will agree that we have to be ahead of the game. We have to be ahead of the game. So at some point, the new right, alt-right trend, the fad is going to be over. There's going to be a new fad, a new trend, and we need to be ahead of the game. We need to be ahead of the curve and bring as many reasonable people together and drive out the agents and the spies and the psychopaths and the narcissists and the lazy people, the lazy bums, and the incompetent. If you like this video, please share, comment, subscribe to our channel, and visit our site, visit our website. It's eng.recenter.com. Very simple. It's eng.recenter.com. That's our website. We'll make more and more content, and if our viewership grows, we'll start a regular news show, a news and commentary show, all these kind of things. I've also written a couple of books, and I plan to translate them into English as well. So check out eng.recenter.com.